Hi, welcome to Coffee at the Crossroads. I'm Bill. Thanks for joining me. Today I want to talk about the way that history is all around us here in the UK. I think in one of my other segments I talked about how one of the things I feel like as a Canadian, as an expat living here, I feel like history is kind of all around us, the buildings and just the street names and the methods of construction and the architecture and all that stuff. And one of the ways that that we see that here is in the post boxes. And I did a little segment on the way the English call things and the way we call things from North America. And one of those things is post box. And while I was doing that, I was kind of going around my neighborhood and I was kind of, shooting post boxes, and they're all different, and there's a fascinating history to post boxes, and so I want to kind of share that with you. I've got a bunch of footage. I'm not just going to sit here and yammer on, and I'm no historian, so like this isn't going to be a history lesson, and there's not going to be a test at the end of it, but it's just one of those things that I think people from here, the English people, they don't even think about it. In fact, while I was shooting this segment, I was videoing one of the post boxes, and this guy walked by and he was like, "That's an interesting thing to take a photo of," he said to me, right? Because of course, this is part of their everyday life, and they the post boxes that are around the neighborhoods, they don't think twice about them, but there's a fascinating history to them, and so. I wanted to kind of do a segment on that, and it's honestly it's kind of been nostalgic for me. It's kind of been poignant for me, to be honest. I'm at a bit of a crossroads in my career. I've got my contract. I work on contracts, and my contract is ending, and I don't have a contract to go on to. And there's a lot of changes in the industry that I work in. I think a lot of people are feeling that. Industries are downsizing, and jobs are being exported overseas, or things are being automation is taking people's jobs, and there's a lot more unemployment. And the reason how that pertains to the post boxes is because people use the post a lot less than they did, right? The post was an important part of Victorian England and of Edwardian England and of the war years and all of that stuff. But people don't use the post anymore. They send emails, and your bills are delivered electronically, and everything's paperless, and people don't write letters anymore, and people don't send postcards as much anymore. And it made me nostalgic, to be honest, because I'm 57, and I felt a little bit like a post box. I'm still strong and sturdy, and I'm still useful, I feel like, but there might not be as much. I might not get used as much as I used to, and so it's a bit. It's a little poignant for me, so I wanted to share that. And for those of you who see a post box, think of us people that are still useful and still have lots to give. And in the way that progress, emails and all that stuff, it's so amazing, but it means changes, right? And so, yeah, I thought about that, and I'm not talking about just about myself. I think there's a lot of us that are going through that, right? Like I said, there's downsizing and there's unemployment, and people have, AI is taking people's jobs. That's something that's happening in my industry, and and so there's a lot of uncertainty out there for a lot of us, and there's probably a lot of uncertainty for these post boxes, right? As people send less mail, as people write less letters, as people, as things go paperless, these post boxes become relics of the past. And I hope I'm not a relic of the past. I hope not. But yeah, it oddly, it kind of hit me a little bit. It was a little nostalgic, and so I want to share that. Share these with you. They're fascinating things. They're fascinating pieces of history, and they're beautiful. When real craftsmanship went into stuff, and stuff was built to last. And you'll see that some of these are 100, maybe 150 years old. They go back to Victorian England. And Victoria was the queen until she died in 1901. So that's 124 years ago. So some of these post boxes are really, really real relics, right? But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about the history of the post box. So they were first introduced in 1852 and 1853 across the country. And there were these, what they call a pillar post box, and I've got lots of examples of that, and you'll see that in the video. Yeah, and then they built these cheaper ones called wall boxes that they built into the stone walls, and they'd put them up on posts and stuff like that. And so I've got some examples of that as well. But yeah, so they're really fascinating. I'm going to get into it, and then I'll take you through some of the history. So this first box is what's called a pillar post box, and it dates back to Queen Victoria. You can see that VR is her cipher, what they called it, and that Victoria Reign, that's her cipher. So that's a Queen Victoria mailbox, and as I say, she was the queen from 1837 to 1901. So this post box is a good 125, 130, maybe 140 years old. Pretty incredible. And the next box we've got, when Queen Victoria died in 1901, King Edward VII, her son, became the monarch, and he was the king from 1901 to 1910. And so we see he's got a couple of the pillar boxes, and also a couple of the wall boxes. You can see they're very cool. Again, but like he was king till 1910, so these are at least 115 years old. And when Edward VII passed away, then George V became king, and he reigned from 1910 to 1936. And he had his cipher is really plain. It's just GR. He was the fifth, but he was the first George in ages, and so he didn't bother putting the V in there. He just was GR. He was a very pragmatic guy, I guess. I don't know. It just wasn't that fancy. So after King George V died in 1936, then King Edward VIII became king. And I don't have a post box for him because he was king for a very, very short amount of time. He was king for less than a year. If any of you remember anything about English history, he abdicated. So that means he stepped down as king so that he could marry an American woman who had previously been married. Gasp! She was divorcée, as they say. She was divorced. And at the time, the royal protocol was that the king could not be married to a divorced woman. That was part of the rules. And so he had to choose between the woman and the crown, and he chose the woman. And so he abdicated. And then King George VI became king, and he reigned from 1936 to 1952. What's really interesting about this post box is they're quite rare. Because he was the king during the war, obviously, till from 1939 to 1945, and they didn't install many post boxes at that time because of the precious iron and steel and all of the stuff that went into it. Those were all dedicated to the war effort. So I was really happy to find this fantastic sample of King George VI. When he passed away in 1952, suddenly his young daughter became the queen. She was Queen Elizabeth II, the one that we probably all know. She was queen from 1952 to 2022. So that's 70 years. She was the longest serving English monarch ever, 70 years plus, and one of the longest reigning monarchs in the world, actually. But yeah, and so lots of post boxes with her cipher on them, and some various ones, various shapes. The styles changed throughout those years because she reigned for so long, and so there's some good examples and lots of variations in the post boxes for her. Yeah, and then since 2022, of course, King Charles has been the king. I could not find a post box around my neighborhood with King Charles cipher on it. There is this one pillar box not far from my house that doesn't have a cipher on it, and I speculate, and I don't know this for a fact, but I speculate that this pillar box was installed after Queen Elizabeth passed away, but before Charles was the coronation, and so he didn't have his royal cipher designed yet. I'm guessing. I could be completely off base about that, but that's my story, and I'm sticking to it. So yeah, so that's it. Yeah, welcome back. Yeah, it's a great little tour to see all these fantastic things, right? And I love the ones that are built into the wall, right? And they've got the hedge around them and in the greenery around them. They're really fantastic, and it's really awesome for me because, you know, not being from here, I don't take them for granted, you know. And I think most of the English people don't even, you know, they just walk by them and they don't even notice. But they're really cool things, right? And to see the little details of that cipher in there, and to know the history of it, I find it fascinating. So yeah, so that's it. And you know, give a little thought for those pieces of history in your neighborhood or in your life. And you know, like I said, you know, I like those mailboxes. There's still lots of life left in those post boxes. And yeah, and so, you know, like I said, they made me feel a little bit nostalgic, and yeah, and so yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and I'm happy to share it. If you liked it, please give me the little thumbs up, and yeah, and subscribe, please, and tell your friends. And again, thanks for joining, and I'll see you again on Coffee at the Crossroads. Cheers.